The space station floated in the cold dark of Sector 12 Delta, spinning slowly above a dying moon. It was a massive place, built by a union of 25 alien races. Some called it the Peace Ring, others called it the Seat of Control. Every species had sent diplomats, engineers, scientists, and guards. They all worked together. Or at least they tried. And then, one day, a human ship arrived at. It was not large. It was not fast. And it did not carry weapons. It was just a diplomatic vessel sent by the Earth Alliance. The crew was small 4 humans, but the one that stood out was the one who said the least. His name was James Riddick. No rank, no medals, no loud voice. Just quiet eyes and soft steps. He always stood behind the others, observing. When they introduced themselves to the station's council, he simply nodded. When asked if he had anything to add, he shook his head. Once, politely the others spoke for hours trading stories, discussing peace, promising technology. But James just watched. He never interrupted, never argued, never bragged, and so the aliens ignored him. Strange how silent that one is, said the insectoid trader Gluckst. Maybe his tongue was removed. No, said the red-skinned warrior Kor, laughing. Maybe he's just a coward. He smells like calm water, said the silent-boned Nerith, but I feel storms inside him. Most didn't listen to Nerith. She always said strange things. Weeks passed. The humans settled into their quarters. They joined the diplomatic meetings. They shared food, maps, and music. James stayed quiet. He explored the station when no one was around, walking the empty halls, watching the walls like they might whisper to him. He started noticing things. Little things. One night, the lights in Sector D-17 flickered. Not a big issue. Maintenance was scheduled. But James watched the footage again and again. He slowed it down, frame by frame. And he saw something. A shadow moved when nothing should have. A form passed by that had no heat signature. And the wall, just for a second, rippled. Like water. He didn't call for help. He didn't panic. He just saved the file and closed the screen. The next morning, a station worker was reported missing. The Alien Council called it a tragic accident. Airlock failure, they said. His own mistake. But the airlock logs had no errors. And only James checked the backup files. He saw the same shadow again. He copied it to a small black device, slid it into his coat, and walked away. Nobody asked what he was doing. The alien diplomats met again. They argued over trade routes and border patrols. James sat in the back. When asked for comment, he simply said, "No changes. But you should double patrols near the outer ring." They laughed. "The quiet one speaks," shouted the scaled. Diplomat Forex. "Is the human afraid of shadows?" Mocked another. James looked at them calm. "You should be." And then he said nothing more. The room fell silent. Only for a moment. Then the laughter returned. That night the station trembled. Barely. Just a light shake. But it was enough to make the floor creak and the gravity systems hiccup. 2 more crew members disappeared, one from a science lab, the other from an energy shaft. Again. No alarms. Again. James was the only one watching the quiet corners of the station. He stopped sleeping. He spent his nights walking the lower decks, where no cameras worked anymore. He stared at walls. He listened for noises no one else could hear. Once, a security bot caught him just standing still in the dark for an hour. "State your purpose," it asked. "Listening," James said. "For what?" He looked up, breathing. The bot logged the reply as nonsense. It didn't understand what James heard. The whispers had started. Not in words, but in sound. Light hums. Wet scraping. Faint tapping. The kind of noise that makes your neck itch. Like something is just behind you. He recorded them. He slowed them down. And when he played them backward, he heard something that made his hands shake. Not fear, not anger. Something deeper. Recognition. He single quotes D heard this sound before. On Earth. During the quiet crisis. No one outside Earth knew much about that event. The files were sealed. The bodies buried deep. The survivors. Changed. James had survived it. But barely. The station didn't know that. One day, he was called into a council meeting. They wanted to discuss security. A loud alien named Rarn was. They're tall, armored, full of pride. You humans speak of peace, Rarn marked. But your silent one sneaks around like a spy. James said nothing. You investigate like a threat, Rarn continued. Is your silence a trick? Still, James did not respond. Answer me, human. James looked at him calmly. Have you noticed what's missing from the walls? What? James turned to the others. The panels. Some are gone. 3 last week. 2 more today. Not damaged, gone. Like something is moving behind them. Rarn scoffed. You're wasting our time. James reached into his coat and slid a small device across the table. It played the slowed audio he had collected. The whispers echoed in the chamber. Cold. Wet. Inhuman. No one spoke. And then the audio stopped. James looked at them. This is not the first time. Not for humans. What are they? One voice asked quietly. James answered simply. We never gave them a name. Names make them real. Rarn stood. Enough. These are stories. Earth ghosts. No, James said softly. Not ghosts. They're patient. They watch. They wait. And what do they want? Someone asked. James's face didn't change. They feed on silence. He walked out. Later that night, Rarn disappeared. His quarters were locked from the inside. The footage showed nothing. The room was empty, clean, quiet. Except for one thing, a small smear of black, liquid near the vent, and a whisper on the audio feed that no one could explain. The council met again. This time, they didn't laugh. What do we do? Asked GLUXT. James stood at the edge of the room, hands behind his back. You ignored the signs, he said. Now they're inside. Can they be stopped? He thought for a moment. Not by walls, not by weapons. Only by understanding what they fear. And what's that? James looked around. His voice was so soft they had to lean in. Us, when we stopped being silent. They didn't understand, but that didn't matter. Because deep in the station, something was moving, slithering, learning, feeding, and James had already begun preparing. He wasn't just a diplomat. He was the last survivor of the only human ship that had ever fought these things. And won. But barely. He had scars no one could see. He had memories that never faded. And he had one rule. Never speak their name, never scream, never run. Just listen and act. The station didn't know it yet, but the war had already begun, and the quiet human was the only one ready to fight. The lights in Corridor G blinked again. 3 short flashes. Then nothing. It had happened 3 nights in a row, always at the same time. The engineers ran full checks. Power grid stable. Circuit boards clean. Nothing was wrong, but something was wrong. James Riddick stood at the end of the corridor, still as stone. He stared at the wall, not the blinking light. The wall beside it, thin lines had appeared, scratch marks. Not deep, but sharp. 4 of them. Like claws dragging through metal. He took a picture. Same pattern, he whispered. No one else had seen them. He checked the vents. One was loose. He slid his flashlight inside. Dust, bits of black thread, and something else wet. Like mucus. Or worse. James stood up and turned off the light. Behind him, the corridor stretched into shadow. He listened, waited, tap, tap, scrape, then silence. He didn't flinch. He just nodded once and walked away. Later that morning, he handed a small recording to the station security chief, a three-eyed lizard-like creature named Vress. "What's this?" Vress asked. "Movement. Lower sectors." "Vents?" Vress laughed. "We have bots. They scan everything." "Bots don't hear what I heard." Vress looked at the human with a smirk. "You always say strange things, Riddick. Quiet, but strange." James leaned forward. "Strange is better than dead." Vress blinked. The human's eyes were calm, cold, not afraid, but focused, like a soldier who'd seen this before. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Vress asked, lowering his voice. James didn't answer right away. Then he said, "It doesn't want to be seen." "That's the first clue." Vress raised a brow. "And the second?" James replied, "It's already watching us." That night, the power dropped in Sector E9 for 8 minutes. Only 8. But in those 8 minutes, 5 people vanished. 1 was a chef. 1 was a diplomat. 3 were guards. No sound. No fight. Just gone. No one saw them leave. No signs of escape or attack. Just a black smear on the floor and a metal door left, swinging open. The council met the next morning in panic. "How can this happen on a station this size?" Shouted one. "We must lock all sectors. No ships may enter or leave." Everyone spoke at once. Everyone except James. He stood at the back of the room, listening. When they finally noticed him, they asked, "What do you suggest, human?" James looked around. Slowly. "Seal the vents," he said. "Post guards in the lower levels, and make noise." They blinked at him. "Noise?" He nodded. "They come in silence, but they hate sound. Loud, living, human sound." Gluckst leaned forward. "You said they feed on silence." "Yes," James replied, "but silence isn't just quiet. Silence is fear, confusion, doubt, the absence of resistance." "They feed on that?" James answered. "Yes, and right now. This station is full of it." The council agreed to take action. For now, guards were posted. Vents were checked. Alarms were tested. But still, people kept disappearing. Always at night. Always without sound. One of the missing was Vress's own cousin, a junior officer. Vress met James outside the mess hall. "You were right," he said, voice low. James nodded. "I usually am. What do we do now?" James handed him a device. It looked like a small cube. Metal. Simple. "What is this?" "Sound emitter," James said. "Old tech. Made for them." "Who made it?" James looked up. "My ship." "Before it was lost." Vress felt cold. "How many of you survived?" "Just me." They placed the device in the power core hallway, where the last attack had happened. Then they waited. For 6 hours, nothing. Then the lights flickered. The air changed, thicker, colder. James stood in the shadows, watching. The device activated. A low hum. Then a sharp shriek like a scream cut short. The air in front of them shimmered. A ripple. Something half visible began to form. Like smoke turning solid. It had arms. Long, thin, bending the wrong way. Its head was more like a mask, featureless. And pale. James didn't move. The creature tilted its head. Like it saw him, then it screamed. Not loud, but deep. Felt in the bones. It rushed forward, but the emitter pulsed, and the thing shattered into dust and dark mist. Vress stared, shaking. "What was that?" James picked up the cube. "That was a scout. Just the first. There are more?" James didn't answer. Instead, he walked back to his quarters. In his room, he opened a black case. Inside were old tools, strange tech. A map, a small book full of drawings of those creatures. And one word, scratched again and again across every page. Listen. He sat down. He knew what was coming next. They were testing the station. Feeling its weak points. Looking for fear. He opened the book to the last page. It had a phrase written in simple letters. First they take the silence. Then they take the living. He closed the book. The warning had been given. But no one was truly listening yet. Not yet. The station's main control deck buzzed with movement. Guards moved in pairs. Engineers checked every panel. And in every hallway, red lights glowed where once everything had been calm blue. Fear was spreading. People whispered when they thought. No one could hear. Rumors moved faster than data rumors about shadows, about disappearances, and about the human who never smiled. James Riddick. He walked through the station like a ghost, silent, watching, always observing the ceilings, the corners, the shadows. Now, someone had noticed him a little too much. His name was Yultek, a high-ranking alien from the Zir Dominion. Tall, with gray skin that shifted colors based on his mood. He hated humans, or more accurately, he hated weakness. And James, to him, looked like the weakest of them all. You walk around like you own this place, Yultak said, blocking James near a loading bay. Always staring, always silent. James said nothing. He simply turned to continue walking. Yultak grabbed his arm. James stopped. His voice was calm. Let go. Yultak laughed. Or what? You'll whisper me to death? For a moment, silence. Then James turned his head. Just slightly. No, he said. But if you keep standing there when the lights flicker, you might not come back. Yultak's smile faded. James walked away. That was the last time anyone saw Yul-Tak. 3 hours later, his communicator beeped. But he didn't answer. A search team was sent. They found his datapad on the floor of Storage Bay 9. The storage log said the door had never opened, but the lights inside were broken. And the walls were wet. Something had dragged across them. Again. James arrived quietly. He looked at the floor, saw the same black smear, saw a single long scratch on the wall that curved like a question mark. One of the guards whispered, "This is where he vanished." James nodded. He asked the wrong question. What was it? Who's in control here? The guard didn't understand. James didn't explain. Back at the council chamber, panic was harder to hide. How can someone just vanish? Asked Gluckst, the traitor. We need to evacuate. Another shouted. No, Bress said, standing tall. If we run, they follow. We can't leave this place undefended. James stood quietly in the back again. As always, this time they turned. To him before he even spoke. What do we do now? Asked Nerith, the silent boned one. James stepped forward. He placed a small square on the table. It projected a map of the station full of red lines and blinking yellow dots. These are all the places where people vanished, he said. Notice anything? They looked. The dots formed a shape. A spiral. Going inward. They're closing in, James said. Center of the station. What's in the center? Someone asked. The core, said Vress, eyes wide. If they get to the core, they won't need to hide anymore, James finished. They'll take over everything. We have weapons, someone said. James looked around. Weapons are loud. That's good. But they're blind. These things don't bleed. They don't burn. You can't shoot what you can't see. Then how do we fight? James opened his black case again. This time, he pulled out a silver rod about the size of a pen. He pressed a button, and it let out a constant high-pitched hum. All the aliens flinched. They hate this frequency. James said, It hurts them. Why do you have this? He looked up, because Earth fought them once, long ago. No one asked what happened to the others from that fight. They didn't need to. That night, Sector J was sealed off. Engineers placed frequency rods throughout the vents. The station speakers played quiet background, noise-human music, old recordings of cities full of sound. For the first time in weeks, no one vanished. But it was not a victory. It was silence. Before the next storm. At 2 o'clock hours, an old maintenance bot activated by itself. It rolled down the corridor, turned left, then exploded. Not violently, just enough to take out the sound system in that part of the station. 7 minutes later, the screen started. By the time guards arrived, all that was left was a message scratched on the wall. He watched. We listened. The guards called James. He arrived, slow and quiet. He stared at the message, then ran his fingers across it. Fresh. They're learning, he whispered. Learning what? The guard asked. James replied, how to talk. The station was quieter than ever. But it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that made people look over their shoulders. That made them whisper, even when alone. That made sound feel like safety. After Yultak vanished, more sectors were locked down. More sound emitters were placed. But people were still disappearing. Not in groups, one by one. Always in places where the walls seemed too dark or too silent. James spent more time below the surface level's deep maintenance tunnels, where almost no one else went. He carried the same black case with him. His steps were slow, controlled. His eyes scanned everything, the walls, the pipes, even the dust. He'd learned long ago that dust told the truth. And in one hallway of subsection K, there was a long streak of clear metal, like something large had moved through and swept the dust away. The streak led to a wall panel, just a normal piece of metal. Until James leaned in. He pressed his ear to it and heard breathing. Not human. Not like any living creature should sound. It was wet, gurgling, faint, but steady. In, out, in, out. Then it stopped. James stepped back slowly. Then the wall rippled, like liquid. For a moment, it wasn't metal at all, but something soft, like skin. Then it hardened again. James placed a small sensor near it, turned, and walked away. Back at the surface, the council met again. Fewer members now. Seats were empty. No one left anymore. We can't keep losing people, said Nereth. They're not people anymore, Gluckst whispered. Not once the walls take them. They're not dead either, Vress added. We would have found bodies. We've found nothing. They looked to James. What are we fighting? Someone asked. Tell us the truth. James stood slowly. His voice, as always, soft and calm. They are not alive like us. Not machines. Not animals. Not ghosts. They are ... echoes. Echoes? Nereth asked. From what? From the first war, James said. The war humans never talk about. Your files are locked, Vress said. Even our top AI couldn't open them. James nodded, because no one was supposed to survive. But I did. What are they? Someone repeated. James paused. We called them the lurking. They live between reality and thought. They use walls, wires, pipes, any structure with silence between the parts. The more silence you give them, the more real they become. Everyone froze. You're saying the station itself is helping them? Asked one voice. James nodded. Only the quiet parts. That same night, one of the engineers stopped, responding. Her name was Tila, a smart and cheerful glyph tech who always wore glowing rings on her horns. She had been working near the coolant vents. Her partner turned around for less than a minute. When he looked back, she was gone. Her tools were on the floor, still warm. Her rings were still glowing. and one wall was wet. The next day, James visited the vent shaft. He didn't say a word. He pulled out a thin rod and began scraping the inside of the vent. After 3 minutes, he pulled out a piece of something. Skin. Not metal. Not wire. Real, pulsing, gray skin. It twitched once in his hand, then stopped. He placed it in a sealed tube and locked it in his case. Then he spoke into a private channel. They're fully forming now. We're running out of time. Do we fight? Vress's voice replied. No, James said. Not yet. First, we wake the walls. Later that evening, strange sounds filled the station. Not whispers, but thumps, bangs, footsteps inside. The walls. Everywhere. Crew stopped sleeping. Lights flickered. Doors refused to open, and something began scratching from inside. James returned to the yell. Council, we need to trigger the pulse. What pulse? James brought out a black cylinder. Thick, heavy, old. This is the device that saved Earth. Once. What does it do? It makes every wall scream. He placed it on the center table. 10 minutes after activation, the entire station will ring with human sound, the kind these things hate. But once it starts, we'll only have one chance. What happens if we fail? James looked around. His voice dropped to a whisper. Then the walls will never be walls again. Nerith leaned forward. Do they feel pain? James answered without emotion. Yes, but not like we do. When they scream, it's not from pain. It's from hunger. Why? Because they're starving. James pointed to the map of the station. They've been feeding on fear, silence, shadows. But it's not enough anymore. They want form, flesh, voice. He looked up. They want to replace us. A long silence followed. Then Vress stood. Then let's make them choke on noise. The day after the pulse, the station felt different. Every wall had shaken. Every corridor had echoed. For 10 full minutes, the old human machine had screamed out across the metal halls. No song, no music, just pure human chaos. Shouts, engines, sirens, drums layered together like a war cry from a forgotten time. The creatures had screamed back. Some were heard. Some were seen. Most just melted away into smoke and bone dust. But the damage they left behind stayed. Black streaks, bent pipes, deep cracks in metal where no tool had ever reached. And after the noise ended, silence returned. Too much silence. James didn't rest. He walked sector by sector, recording the changes, checking readings, testing walls. Something was bothering him. Something had changed. They're shifting, he told Vress. Adapting. Vress looked up from a screen. You're saying? The sound hurt them, but it also woke them up? James nodded. It made them angry. Now they're trying to learn faster. Learn what? James's voice lowered. How to be like us. The council demanded answers. Why had Earth never warned them? Why had this kind of weapon, this pulse, never been shared? Why had James come, not as a scientist or soldier, but as a quiet diplomat? That's when Gluckst asked the question. Others were already thinking, what is this human really hiding? Vress didn't answer, but he had already started digging. He contacted Earth's secure channel. He asked for full records on James. Riddick. Denied. He tried again. Denied. He asked his own government to help. They sent their best AI. It tried to break into the Earth archives. 3 seconds later, the AI was destroyed. No data, no logs. Just a single message returned. Restricted. Echo class. Do not pursue. Vress stared at the message. Echo class? No one had heard that term before, but someone had. Na-reth. She spoke quietly, too. Vress in the middle of the night. Echo class was a human secret label for events that didn't stay in time, for battles that kept repeating in memory. Not just for places, but for people. Vress frowned. People like James? Nerith nodded. People who return from places no one should survive. That same night, James stood alone on the observation deck, watching the stars. He didn't sleep. He never did. Not anymore. Behind him, Vress walked in. I tried to read your file, Vress said. James didn't turn. I know. It wouldn't open. It destroyed our systems. James stayed quiet. Why? Vress asked. What are you hiding from us? James turned his head slightly. Not from you, he said. From them. Vress stepped closer. You fought them before. Yes. Where? James's hands tightened at his sides. Planet Echo 7. It was a human colony once. They came in through the radio waves, through silence between words. They rewrote the air itself. What happened? We lost the planet, but you survived. James finally turned. His eyes were not like other humans. They looked normal, but deeper. Older. Vres stepped back. You're not just a survivor. James said nothing. You're a weapon. Still silence. They made you into something. James nodded. They had no choice. A long pause. Vress finally asked, What's in your case, James? James unlocked the black case slowly. Inside were the same things he'd carried for weeks. Tools, maps, devices. But under them, something else. A metal syringe, a tiny vial with glowing black fluid, and a chip with the Earth symbol burned out. James looked at them. This is all that's left of the last team. You're the last? Vress asked. James nodded once. They made us hear what no one should, trained us to speak without speaking, to listen through death. I was the only one who didn't go mad. Vress whispered. Are you still human? James looked out at the stars again. I don't know. Silence stretched. Then James said, They're not just in the walls anymore. What do you mean? James reached into his coat and pulled out a photo. It had been taken hours ago in Sector M. It showed a crew member standing, still in the middle of a corridor, but their shadow was wrong. It bent the other way. It moved even when the body didn't. They've copied someone, James said. A full mimic. Vress's heart sank. Who? James shook his head. I don't know yet, but they'll use them to destroy the sound emitters from the inside. Vress whispered, We can't trust anyone now. James finished the sentence. Not even ourselves. 3 days passed. No new disappearances, but the silence felt worse than before. It was not peace. It was waiting. James knew what was coming. He had seen it before, right before his last team died. The lurking never rushed. They studied. They copied. They became. And now the mimic was loose. It had already destroyed 2 sound emitters. Not with claws, not with shadows, with passwords. Someone inside the crew had been replaced. The station's heart. The core control chamber was the next target. If it fell, the entire place would go dark. The lurking would have total silence. Enough to fully break through, and no one would stop them. The council gathered. Again. Smaller this time. Seats were empty. Some missing. Some hiding. Some too afraid to leave their rooms. James stood at the edge of the chamber as usual. Silent hands. Behind his back. The voices of the council were sharp. Scared. They're mimicking us. No one is safe. We need to scan everyone. They walk like us. Talk like us. How do we know who's real? It was Nerith who finally said, We need guidance. We need someone to lead this. The room fell still. Slowly, all eyes turned toward the quiet human. James didn't move. Vress took a deep breath. James, we need you. Still, he said nothing. A younger alien stood up. Why don't you ever speak? Why are you always hiding? Something? Then James stepped forward. Just once. One step. He placed his case on the table and opened it. Inside was the silver rod again. He pressed a button. A quiet tone began to hum. It filled the room, not loud, but strong enough to make the walls tremble. And that's when James finally spoke. His voice was calm, but every word felt like a bullet. They're already inside the core. Gasps filled the room. They're not attacking. They're waiting. They want you to panic. They want silence between your trust. He stepped closer to the center. They don't kill with claws. They kill with fear, confusion, and doubt. And you've given them all of it. Gluckst asked. What do we do? James raised his voice, not a shout, but firm. We fight. Not with weapons, not with fire, with noise, with unity, with human chaos. He turned to Vress. Lock down the core, but leave me a way in. Alone? Vress asked. James nodded. They don't want me in there. Why not? James finally said it. Because I remember them. The room froze. James took a deep breath. I remember what they did to my team. I remember the sound they make when they're born. I remember the way their shadows move before their bodies do. I remember how they learn, how they whisper, how they steal. He held up the black syringe. I also remember how to stop them. You mean with that? Nerith asked. James nodded. This isn't poison. It's memory. Sealed pain. Everything they fear trapped inside. Why you? James answered, because I'm the only one who's been part of their silence. And come back. Then the lights flickered. The screens, GLITCHED. The map of the station blinked. And one red dot appeared inside the core chamber. Not moving. Just waiting. James looked at it. They've made their move. Without another word, he picked up his case and walked toward the door. Vress ran after him. Are you going to kill it? James didn't turn. I'm going to remind it who we are. The corridor to the core was darker than it should have been. Lights flickered. Doors groaned. The walls, usually smooth and silver, looked cracked like old skin stretching over bone. James walked alone. No guards. No counsel. Just his black case in one hand and the silver rod glowing faintly in the other. His steps echoed softly. Too softly. Every sound felt swallowed, dampened, as if the air itself didn't want to carry. His footsteps. He passed empty rooms, empty halls, open doors. Every space he entered felt watched. Not by eyes, but by something deeper. By memory. He reached the final bulkhead, leading to the core. It was open, not forced, not damaged. Just unlocked. James paused. He placed his hand on the wall beside the door. It was warm. Alive. He whispered, I know you're listening. Then he stepped through. The core chamber was huge. A circular room filled with wires, glowing, tubes, and humming energy flows. In the center stood the core, a spinning column of light, feeding the entire station, and right in front of it stood a figure. Still, calm, familiar. Tila. The missing glyph engineer. She turned slowly, smiling. Her glowing horn rings blinked just like they used to. James, she said softly. James said nothing. You've come all this way, she continued. But for what? Her voice was perfect, exact, but her shadow twitched on the floor like a broken limb trying to stand. James raised the silver rod. Her smile remained. Is that really necessary? I only want to talk. James didn't blink. Where's the real Tilla? The mimic tilted its head. What is real? We speak the same. We think now. We remember her thoughts, her hopes, her fears. We are her. No. James said, you're the hunger behind the memory. The mimic stepped closer. The others were easier, it said. They feared us. But you You fear something else. It stopped in front of him. You fear what you became. James lowered the rod slightly. The creature leaned forward. Why do you think the others died? Why do you think you lived? James looked it in the eye. Because I became the silence. Then he pulled the syringe from his coat. The mimics. Smile faded. You wouldn't. James pressed it into his neck, injected the black fluid. His eyes flared. His hands shook. The sound rod in his other hand screamed high-pitched, noise that shattered glass all around him. The core pulsed once, twice dot, and then everything stopped dot, no sound. No hum, no breath. The station went dark dot, total silence. Across all levels lights. Blinked out, doors froze. Screens shut down dot from one end of the station to the other. Silence for 20 full seconds. Nothing moved. Then the screens began dot, not human, dot, not alien, not from mouths, from walls, from pipes, from the metal itself, like something inside the station had been pulled out forcefully. All over the station, shadows. Uncoiled. Black liquid burned away. Cracks filled themselves. Vents hissed as creatures hiding within were dragged back into nothing dot in the core chamber. The mimic fell to its knees. Its eyes melted. Its form twisted, failing to hold its shape. You brought it back. It hissed. You brought the sound from before. James dropped the rod. He stood straight now. Eyes dark, pulsing with the memory serum. I am the sound. He reached toward the core, pressed a sequence known only to him. Human override code. And the lights returned dot bright. White. Loud dot all across the station. Alarms activated. Sound filled every hallway. The silence was gone. Ress watched from the command deck, jaw tight. He did it, Nerith whispered. He woke the station. But Ress wasn't smiling. Not just the station, he said. He woke something inside. Himself. Down in the core, James stood alone. The mimic's body had dissolved into mist. Dot. He looked up. Dot. The station was safe. For now, but the price was clear. Part of James had changed. Dot again. Dot. And this time, he might not come back the same. Days passed after the core event. Dot. The station buzzed with life again, lights steady. Systems running, voices returning to the halls. But something was different now. Everyone looked over their shoulders. Watched shadows closely. Slept with lights on, and every time they saw James, they went quiet. He no longer spoke unless necessary. His eyes didn't look like they once did. He walked like a soldier, like someone who had fought, and was still fighting. Inside, the council called for a full meeting again, this time in the secure tower, deep beneath the station's command level. Only the highest-ranking members were allowed. Ress, Nerith, a few others. Dot, and James. He stood. Near the back, arms crossed, face unreadable. The meeting began like usual reports. Data, theories. Dot. Then, Ress said, there's something you all need to see. He pressed a button. A hologram appeared of Earth. Dot. The Earth, known through travel brochures or education files. But a different one. Satellite footage. Hidden bases. Subterranean facilities. Dot. And red dots. Dot. Dozens. Dot. No. Hundreds. Dot. All marked. Lurking. Breach events. Contained. The room went silent. What is this? Nerith asked, voice shaking. Ress didn't answer. He just turned to James. Dot. James stepped forward. The war didn't start here, he said quietly. It started on Earth. Over 100 years ago. You fought them before? Nerith asked. James nodded once. They landed in the deep. Forests, the quiet places, places humans already feared. We didn't understand them at first. We thought they were ghosts, hallucinations, monsters. And what did you do? James looked at the red dots. We lost entire towns, villages. Research teams. But no one ever knew. No, James said, because humans made a choice. He paused. We didn't tell the galaxy. We didn't ask for help. We didn't scream. We did what we always do when something threatens our home. We buried it, studied it, fought it, alone. A silence fell over the room. James stepped closer to the map. These containment zones, these were testing grounds, not for weapons, for memories. Sounds, frequencies. We learned what they feared. And we used it. Why hide it from the rest of us? One elder asked, almost angry. James didn't flinch, because we saw what fear did to you, what it did to your crew. Your people turned against each other after one mimic. He looked around the room. Humans know fear, but we don't run from it. We lock it in a cage and teach it our name. Everyone sat in silence. Then Vress spoke. Are they truly gone from the station? James shook his head. No, Pat was just one. A scout. The room grew cold. James continued. There's something bigger out there. Something old. The ones we fought on Earth, they ran from it. Nerith blinked. The lurking are scared of something else? Yes, James said. And now it's coming. He opened his case, but inside wasn't a weapon this time. It was a file, stamped in red. Project. HROW slid it. Vress opened it. His hands trembled. Inside were pages of human experiments, not just sound emitters, not just memory syringes, but something darker, biological tuning, mental sync fields, human minds, trained to echo pain through space. What is this? Nerith whispered. James said just one word. Back up. Then the alarms rang. Station Y. Again. But this time it wasn't an internal breach. It was external. The lurking weren't hiding anymore. They were coming, all of them. Ships, creatures, clouds of shifting black mass. Outside the windows, space twisted. James looked up calmly. It's starting. Again. Vress gripped the table. Can we win? James gave a small, grim smile. That depends. On what? James turned to them. If you're ready to stop being afraid of humans and start fighting like them. The lurking did not arrive in ships. They arrived as absence. Sensors went blind first, one by one. Whole sectors blacked out. Satellites froze mid-orbit. Then came the static, a loud hiss across every speaker, screen, and mind-link system. But it wasn't just noise. It was language. Vress clutched his ears. They're speaking through noise. James didn't react. He had heard it before. He closed his eyes. They're warning us. No. They're remembering us. A voice cut through the storm. Sharp human. All units prepare sound bursts. Load harmonic frequencies. James opened his eyes. He was no longer just a quiet man. He was now commander of humanity's darkest knowledge. The allies gathered in the war. Chamber species that had once feared humans now stood beside them. Vress, the strong-jawed Trulkan captain. Nerith, a telepath who still winced at James's. Memories. Zaya, a machine mind who had downloaded Earth's entire conflict log overnight. The plan was clear. They couldn't win by force. Not with lasers or torpedoes. They had to fight with memory. The lurking fed on silence, confusion, and fear. They lived in forgotten places, in cracks of time where sound never reached. So James did the unthinkable. He gave them everything. From the command center, he broadcast human pain. Old wars. Screams from trenches. The sound of children crying in bombed cities. Whispers of dying astronauts, floating alone. Raw emotion. It hit, lurking like fire in a dry forest. The void outside twisted. Their black clouds screeched, trying to push back, trying to erase the memories. But James had prepared more. Each species. had a sound weapon now. Not machines, voices, chants, stories, songs of survival passed down by grandmothers. On burned worlds, each race stood together. And they spoke, not with fear, but with truth. It burned through the black fog like lightning. The lurking screamed in reversa. Sound like time melting. Ships around the station began to glow. Even metal seemed to sing. But the lurking weren't done. They focused everything on one point. James's ship. A direct mental strike. Inside his mind, he saw it again. Earth burning. His unit gone. The bunker. The silence. But this time, he remembered everything. He held the sound rod tight and whispered one word into it. Now. The rod shattered in his hand. A wave burst out, not visible, not touchable, but undeniable. It carried his memory. All of it. Years of grief, rage, silence. Survival. The lurking absorbed it and choked. They had never touched a mind like his. Mind that had been quiet too long, and when it finally screamed, they couldn't survive it. One by one, the black ships split apart. Some simply vanished, like shadows and light. Others turned into smoke and dust. A final burst cracked through the stars. Then, silence. True silence, but not from fear. From peace. For the first time since the war began. The station was still. Everyone stood frozen. And slowly, the lights steadied. The hum returned. The void was empty again. James stood alone in the war room, breathing hard, skin pale, eyes dark. Zaya spoke softly. You gave them too much of yourself. James nodded. I had to. It was the only language they understood. Vress looked out the window. Is it over? James didn't answer. He only whispered one part of it. The war was over, but peace didn't come easily. Not right away. The galaxy was still afraid, not of the lurking, but of what beat them. James sat in a quiet chamber far from the battle stations. His hands trembled now, not from fear, but from the aftershock of what he had done. He had emptied his soul into the stars. He had spoken pain so deeply buried, even he forgot. It was there. And now the galaxy listened. For the first time. A message had gone out after the final battle. Sent on every frequency. It was not from a council, not from a government. It was James's voice. He said no threats, no warnings, only the truth. There are things in this universe that feed on silence. And for a long time, humanity stayed silent. We stayed out of your wars. We watched. We listened. We sent diplomats with soft voices. But that silence was not weakness. It was restraint. The message echoed across stars. Some planets replayed it again and again. Some banned it. Others recorded it into their history forever. Nerith visited James days later. He had changed. He no longer flinched at James's presence. His eyes showed something new. Respect. You're leaving? He asked. James nodded. My part's done. Where will you go? James smiled a little. Back to Earth, to the silence I once escaped. But won't it follow you? The stories? The fear? James stood and looked out the window. No, he said. It's not fear anymore. It's understanding. On many worlds, statues were built, not of James, but of a man standing alone, quiet, watching the stars. Some called him the guardian of silence. Others called him the first memory speaker. But Earth knew him by a different name, the last quiet human. And though he walked alone, his voice was now everywhere. On ships. In classrooms. In command centers. One message, repeated in every language. Silence is not peace. Peace is when silence is no longer needed. The galaxy would never forget the day silence died, because that was the day the universe finally heard what it had tried to ignore. Humanity and it never dared forget them again.